Good evening and welcome to the next installment of Meet the Leaders. I am your host, Jerry McPherson, Director of Economic Empowerment for the Greater Phoenix Urban League. And tonight's broadcast is an important one. We'll be talking about the housing crisis. As you all know, the eviction moratorium was rescinded just a few weeks back, and many people are facing challenges with maintaining and paying their rent during the pandemic. This has also impacted homeowners as well. It has exacerbated the spread of the COVID-19 infection rate. So tonight we'll be talking with some experts in the field who can provide you with all the information on how you can take advantage of the plethora of resources that are out there to make sure that you are able to stay in your home, keep your rent paid, keep your mortgage paid, and keep you and your family safe. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the president of the president and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Urban League, George Dean. Take it away, George.
Good evening. I'm George Dean, President and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Urban League, and I extend a warm welcome to each of you for the September 2021 Meet the Leaders Forum. The disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on people of color has highlighted economic and health disparities across the United States, created by centuries of systematic racism, according to the National Urban League State of Black America report. The report also found that Black and brown Americans are more likely than white Americans to live in crowded housing and work in essential jobs, causing Black and brown Americans to be nearly 3 times as likely to contract the virus than white Americans. In addition, African American home ownership rates are still well below the national average. Anniversaries afford us important opportunities to reflect, as we did recently with the 9/11 anniversary. There can be no adequate conversations about the dual pandemics of COVID-19 and systemic racism without talking about housing in America. Home ownership is the gateway to the American middle class, and with it, the professed American dream. Owning a home is one of the only ways that average Americans can build wealth and equity for themselves and their dependents. Amid the economic turmoil of the 1930s, the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, was created to help make that dream more accessible to struggling Americans, specifically by ensuring private mortgages for buyers and getting FHA-backed mortgage. Home buyers would be asked for a lot less upfront and charged significantly less in interest. To determine which borrowers qualify, the FHA created a system of maps rating the level of perceived financial risk in different neighborhoods. Historically, Black and brown communities were always designated high risk and marked on the maps in red. In other words, redlined. If you care about racial equality, the home ownership gap and segregation of neighborhoods should greatly disturb you. Though redlining was banned in name with the passing of the 1968 Fair Housing Act, the racial home ownership gap is today wider than it was in the 1940s when it was 22.8%. In the first quarter of 2020, 73.7% of white households owned their homes compared to 44% of black households. The median net worth of black households in 2016 was $17,150 compared to $171,000 for white households. That kind of disparity still exists today, and in fact, it has expanded. We can expect racial disparities to show themselves in the increased rate of evictions and foreclosures we are soon to see because of the pandemic. Even today, according to an analysis revealed from the Center for Investigative Reporting, the zip code of your residence often determines your ability to secure home equity loans. Without the home equity loan, you might not be able to make necessary home repairs, which will decrease the property values and cause neighborhoods to deteriorate. In today's market, it has become apparent that soaring home prices and rents are fueling real estate companies' appetite for housing, adding unwelcome competition for many who would otherwise be home buyers. Last week, the White House said it was ordering federal housing finance agencies to give buyers and nonprofit a 30-day exclusive window to make offers on more than 12,000 homes that failed to sell in foreclosure auctions. Tonight, we'll put together a panel to discuss further the housing challenges faced by communities of color. We have Ms. Courtney Holmes, a news reporter for ABC 15 News, Mike Shore, the president and CEO for Harm Inc., and Herb Jackson, the Greater Phoenix Urban League Vice President for Housing. I urge all of you to listen closely, ask questions, and to know and recognize that the Greater Phoenix Urban League is here to assist you in any way that we can in achieving the American dream of home ownership. Together, we make a difference. Back to you, Jerry.
Thank you so much, President Dean, for your words, your insight, and your leadership to the Greater Phoenix Urban League and the Greater Phoenix community over the past 29 years. As mentioned, we have a great panel before you, well-informed, well-knowledgeable, to get the information that you need to impact your lives and the lives of your family members. For any of you who are new to the broadcast, those of you who are returning to the broadcast, we have a bit of homework for each of you. We need you to like, comment, share, let the world know that you're with us. We want to get as many people to the broadcast as possible. So again, hit like, comment, share. Let us know what part of the valley you're tuning in from. Let us know what brought you to the program. Let us know how you heard about us. Let's get some activity in the chat room. And of course, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat at any time. We want to make sure that we get your questions answered. So if you have a question, drop it in the chat. We can address it during the program. We definitely save time for the end of the broadcast to make sure that our followers, our viewers, get their questions answered to the best of our ability. With that being said, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Courtney Holmes, news reporter with ABC 15. Welcome to the broadcast, Courtney.
Hi. Just to give a little bit about myself, I cover a lot of things, but for the past year and a half, the duration of the pandemic, I have been covering evictions, housing, and homelessness, which has become even more of a hot topic and even more a focus, even during this past year and a half, from the time that the pandemic started until now. It's become even more of a focus, both locally, nationally, and I look forward to just sharing some of the things that I've learned during this past year and a half.
Thank you so much, Courtney. We look forward to getting into the conversation as well. You joined us just about this time last year when we first addressed the housing crisis. So we're looking to definitely have a retrospective look at how things changed and what you've all learned in the past year. So looking forward to getting into the conversation. Next, I would like to introduce Mike Shaw, President and CEO for Home Inc. Hello, Mike. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you to President Dean and the Urban League for this invitation. I look forward to chatting about the housing crisis here. Just really quickly, Home Inc. is a housing provider that focuses primarily on serving nonprofit organizations as a partner and administering their voucher type programs for homeless households. And typically those households also are part of the regional behavioral health system as someone who experiences either a serious mental illness or perhaps general mental health conditions and other co-occurring issues. And we operate scattered site voucher programs, very, very similar to the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher programs that our public housing authorities operate. These are just specifically targeted to those individuals and families who are exiting homelessness and getting back into housing in the community. So anxious to talk about those voucher programs and where we're at.
Thank you so much, Mike. We did have a chance to talk a little bit earlier, and we started getting into the communities that you support. I'm excited to dive into this conversation and get the information out to those who may be in need. So thank you for joining us today. And last but not least, I would like to introduce the Vice President and Housing Director for the Greater Phoenix Urban League, Mr. Herb Jackson. Herb, welcome to the broadcast. Hey, Herb, you may be on mute.
I'm like you, I forgot to unmute myself.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to you and George Dean particularly, who I've known for quite some time. And he and I have been through this struggle for a while, particularly back in 2007, 2008, and Mike and I were talking about it earlier, the whole NSP program, NFMC program, when we had the huge issues with housing, particularly here in Phoenix, is one of I guess Arizona was one of the 5 hardest hit states in that particular program, that particular situation too. I want to make sure that everyone understands we are a full service housing approved agency by HUD. We have 2 HUD certified counselors, and what that means is that after August 1, 2021, the only persons allowed to provide housing counseling and receive HUD funds are people who have been certified by HUD. You had to pass the test. And we have 2 of them here, myself and Linda Osuna. Linda works out in the providing supportive services to some of our tax credit properties. We offer housing counseling for financial coaching, financial literacy. We do pre and post counseling for the homeowners. We do mortgage situations if you're behind in your mortgage, or if you have a default situation, or if you're being foreclosed on, we can help you with those items also too. So that's kind of all the things that we do. We're a jack of all trades, and we try to be master of all of them. Of course, obviously, you can't be master of everything, but so far as this rental situation that's coming up now, we are not contracted by Spitfire, who handles most of that for the state and for the city. So what we do in the rental situations, if you need that kind of assistance, we refer you to our partners who do provide that service. That's as a kind of an opening statement. That's basically to let you know where we are, what we do. And with this pandemic, we do most of it now via Zoom. We don't see anyone in person. We offer the home buyer education courses that are required by most lenders. Those are offered through eHome America, and that's required by most of the lenders in order to get an FHA or a USDA VA loan nowadays. With that, I'll just wait to hear questions.
Thank you so much, Herb, and again, thank you to our panelists for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get right into the conversation. I'm actually going to start with Courtney Holmes again, who's, as you mentioned earlier, throughout the past year, you've become an expert in this area. You've been focused on it greatly. So, Courtney, if you can just kind of give us a recap of what you've been experiencing over the past year.
I'll start with evictions. While there was a moratorium that prevented most evictions, that did not stop evictions from happening. So when you look at the types of evictions that were happening, most of them, at least many of them that I covered, were people who were already behind in rent. And then when the pandemic hit, there was just no way they were going to be able to catch up. These are folks who were already paying more than the 30% that you're supposed to be paying toward housing. They were already burdened by rent. And a lot of what I've been doing is following that process, how it has played out, where people end up after they are evicted. And it plays out very differently, depending on who you are, depending on your support system, things of that nature. Now, homeowners were something different. A lot of homeowners could work out with their lender to defer that. But one of the things that was happening early on was it was becoming, it would be deferred and then there would be a balloon payment. So that's something for people to watch out for now, industry-wise, whether or not these balloon payments will come due before people are able to actually pay for them.
Thank you, Courtney. And that's a great opportunity to segue into the discussion and bring Mike into it. And again, for our panelists, if you have any questions, comments, you want to add on to something that another panelist said, please feel free to jump in. We're going to very much treat this as a roundtable discussion. We want you all to engage in conversation and get the information out to the public at hand. So, Mike, one thing that Courtney mentioned was she was focused on those that have been evicted from their homes and where they ended up. I know your organization works with that population of homelessness. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about how your organization has helped these individuals and those who may be experiencing a similar situation out there watching us today?
Yeah, certainly. So ultimately, people who become homeless as a result of an eviction or really anything, they tend to encounter our homeless services system through a couple of front doors, and we try as best we can to act like a service delivery system and not individual organizations operating very much in silo. So we try to have one by name list, is what we refer to it in our sector, of people who are experiencing homelessness, and you can get onto that list either through contact by an outreach professional if you're literally on the streets, sleeping in your vehicle, something along those lines. Folks know about the Human Services Campus, which is where CAS, the Central Arizona Shelter Services main adult shelter, is located at. And folks probably also know about UMOM and other shelter services throughout the valley. All of those folks are able to do an intake and assessment of someone who is experiencing a housing crisis and try to determine what's the best way to get them back into housing as quickly as we possibly can. We don't want people to hit the emergency shelter system if at all possible. It's not a great place to be. So if we can divert you from the system and help you stay housed or return to a stable housing environment, perhaps with family or natural support systems, there's efforts made there. But if shelter becomes necessary, we're trying to increase the number of shelter beds across the community right now. A lot of discussion about that, about where they're sited and what they look like and who operates them and for what populations. But then there are also transitional housing options out there. And then finally, the programs that Home Inc. is mostly involved with are the permanent housing programs. And these are, again, voucher operated programs. And there are essentially two different models. There is a rapid rehousing program, which is a lighter touch intervention. It's a shorter amount of rental assistance and case management that perhaps someone who has only become homeless for the first time and just needs that support to get back on their feet and utilize that intervention for a short period. And then there are permanent supportive housing vouchers, and those vouchers are intended to last for as long as is necessary to help someone who needs that long-term case management and wraparound support, together with a permanent subsidy in order to stay stably housed in the community. So, the first thing, again, if somebody is experiencing homelessness, I would encourage you guys to consider calling 211. That is operated by an organization here in the community called Solari. They used to be known as the Crisis Response Network. And they've done quite a bit during the pandemic to stand up a lot of different services, call center operations to support people experiencing homelessness and housing crisis, utility crisis, to make sure they get deployed, or the resources that we have in our community get deployed to the right folks. So 211 is really a good option for the community.
Jerry, I'd like to kind of tag on to what Courtney talked about with respect to the particulars as it regards to homeowners who are under forbearance. There's something that they need to be made aware of. It depends upon what type of mortgage you have. If, for example, you have a portfolio loan, which means that it's not backed by the government, it's not a GSE, then the servicers who handle and service those loans are bound by the investors. So the investors are not bound by any moratoriums. They're not bound by any edicts by HUD or FHA with respect to what happens to their mortgages. They are private investors and they control that. For the most part, they tend to go along with what the feds are doing, because they, like anyone else, they don't want to be in the house owning business. They're in the house mortgage business. So they're not anxious to foreclose on people. But I just want to make sure that people are aware of that. The next thing they need to be aware of, even if you're on a moratorium, if you're on a forbearance, when you get information from your lender, open it and read it. You need to keep up with that. Sometimes there's been a couple of cases where people, because they were in the moratorium, they accepted the broad-based moratorium. Turns out that that person didn't happen to have a COVID quote type of situation that caused it. And it was a letter that put them in foreclosure. They didn't open it because they thought the broad fact that all of a sudden they had an FHA loan, that the government said FHA has to forbear my loan. That's not true. You have to look at the specific circumstances of each loan. So people need to, number one, still communicate with their lender. Always communicate with your lender. Number two, there are certain things that can happen at the end of the forbearance. And that's going to be coming October 3rd, everybody's forbearance will end. But what we have to do, or what the lenders have to do, and what we housing counselors do with folks who have those sort of issues, we go along with the lenders and the servicers and make sure that they follow the proper steps. Each FHA has a certain way that they handle their loans and surplus, and it's not always a balloon payment. It depends. They look at lowering the interest rate, extending the term, if it's possible to get your mortgage payment to a point, if you're working, to a point where it's at least no more than 31% of your gross monthly income. Then they can even take some of that money that's forbearance and put it on the back end, so that you only pay it when you refinance or you pay off your loan altogether. I was talking to a lender today in my office, and I told them I was going to be on this meeting, and I brought up a situation to them and asked them what would they do in this case. I have a client who's been in her home for 25 years. The home she owes, maybe she's refinanced it once, she owes maybe $160,000 on it. She hasn't worked in a year and a half. Everything has been forborne, been forbear. The house is worth $400,000 and some odd thousand. I said, what do you do with a person like that? She has no income, so you can't refinance her. Her only choice is to sell the house. So even if she sells the home and she has all this income, she still can only rent. She can't buy a house because she has no income. So I suggested to them that they might take a look at treating that like they do a reverse mortgage. Use some of her equity to pay that mortgage and pay off the arrearages, and then pay the mortgage until she starts working again. But the next piece of this is by September the 17th, which is, I guess, was 4 days from now, the state is supposed to file their final plan for the Arizona Homeowner Assistance Fund, and they got $199 million to assist homeowners. And with that, they have some statistics here. I don't know if you want them, or I don't know if they're the board people or not, but I'll give them to you anyway. in the state of Arizona, there are 383,000 mortgages that are available, that people have low mortgages. 23% of those are low-income buyers. 34% of them are high minority population borrowers. The forbearance rate is 3.2%. There's 12,263 loans currently in forbearance. Statewide forbearance rate is 3.2%. The low income is 4%. High minority is 4.3%. The delinquency rate is 1.1. That's really a pretty low rate. Federal Reserve Mortgage, the dashboard there for bank service portfolio loans only. Those are the ones I was telling you about, where the banks are servicing the loan for the private investors. There's 11,000 of those, and only 401 of those are in forbearance, and 133 are in delinquency. And their forbearance rates are 3.6 and delinquency rates 1.2. And that again goes back to the fact that the investors, they do what they want to do. But
Herb, I'm sorry if I can interject a bit. I did want to go back before we went too far regarding homeowners. I wanted to get back to those experiencing some rent challenges. I guess the best way to put it. And now, Mike, you mentioned the idea or the importance for a renter getting their concerns addressed before it's too late. So not waiting until they actually get evicted or wait until they or have to see a judge to that matter. What suggestions would you have someone in this very moment behind in their rent and have a balloon payment that may or may not be coming up soon?
Courtney, go ahead. Or you go ahead, Courtney. I'll jump in as well. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. If you are behind, and even if you think you might get behind, apply for rental assistance in the city where you live. The city of Phoenix right now, they have several $1 million left to give out, right? But they are behind in giving that out. They are 60 to 90 days out from looking at people's applications. So if you feel like you are going to have an issue, apply right now, because once you're evicted, once you are out of options, you're out of luck, because there is a wait for everything. There is a wait for housing. There is a wait for homelessness services. There is a wait for help from these organizations. But the other thing is, even if you have been evicted, you still want to apply, because they can apply this money, this CARES Act money, this COVID-19 relief money, the reconciliation money. They can apply that to, first of all, the judgment that you get from the eviction, which will show paid, but they can also apply that to a deposit for your next place. This money it's pretty flexible in how it can be used. So even if you have, let's say you have been evicted and you're couch surfing right now, you still should apply, because eventually it will be returned and eventually you will have access to that money.
I would like to second that opinion, the statement. It's very important that you, again, just like the homeowners, read your mail. Don't assume because the paper, you read in the paper, saw on TV that there's a rental eviction, you can't be evicted. Well, you may or may not be evicted until you read. Those are individual circumstances. So you have to pay attention to your personal self. Read your mail.
Yeah, and I think, you have to speak with your landlord. And even if you're at the point at which, you're having a contentious relationship, so they're behind in rent and they're upset, you have to speak with them. I mean, they, believe it or not, they don't want to evict. They don't want to have to go to court to incur court fees and legal costs. They would prefer to be paid. And if they have an opportunity to see that you have an application submitted and it's in the queue for payment, that's generally going to be something that they're interested in working with you on, so that they can avoid that eviction and get the payment for what they're owed. One thing to understand is the process of getting the rental assistance, the emergency rental assistance out into the hands of landlords has not gone well, not here and not anywhere, frankly, across the country. I'm looking at a dashboard right here, and out of the $25 billion that has been sent out into the country to provide this assistance, we've got 7.75 billion spent so far. That's 31%. And I think in Arizona, we're closer to 10, 11, 12%. I mentioned Solari and 211 because one of the things that they're doing is they were contracted by the state to provide a call center and some help with people who needed help navigating lines to get vaccinations, testing. And when things started to slow down a little bit, instead of them sitting around and not taking calls, they actually reached out to some of these cities and the counties and said, we know that people are trying to get their applications turned in for rental assistance and they need some help. And so they started to make phone calls to the people who had applied for rental assistance to those jurisdictions to find out what they could do to assist them in getting their applications the rest of the way filled out and sent in. And it's actually moved the needle a little bit. So I do think 211 is a really good resource for people to keep in mind. I know it sounds like we got it chatted out here. There's a link for ArizonaEvictionHelp.org, which is a pretty good site that talks about what the eviction process looks like. And that's very important for you to understand that if you get a notice posted on your door informing you that you have some rent due and that you're under threat of eviction, you need to understand what the process looks like. You don't have to move right then, right there. There's a process to go through, to the court. You have an opportunity to plead your case. You have an opportunity to document your hardship as a result of the pandemic. It's not until a judgment has been awarded and then later a writ of restitution has been ordered by court where the constable comes out. And so there is time, and it's good for renters to really understand what that process looks like so that they can fare a little better in that process. So that's a really good website with some good resources.
Mike, thank you so much for sharing that. And as you all can see on the screen, azevictionhelp.org. If you have any rental concerns, now's the time to act. As both Herb has mentioned, Courtney mentioned, as well as Mike, read your mail, inform yourself, understand the process. The better you are informed on this, the better and more efficiently you can act and respond to it. So thank you for sharing each of that information. One other thing that we started to dive into that maybe we can kind of circle back to that is those facing challenges paying their mortgage. And what's interesting about that is, using the last example, when we talk about evictions and renters, a lot of the attention has not gone to the homeowners in that situation. So we talk about the renters and keeping them in the home, but I don't know if we spent enough time talking about the homeowner of that property who is also being impacted by that. So we're going to start with Herb, or go back to Herb, I should say. And I know you and I were talking a little bit earlier about some of these programs that are available. What information would you like to share regarding that program and how homeowners can inform themselves to take advantage of this program that's about to open up?
Okay, thank you, Jerry. It's called Homeowner Assistance Fund. It's going to be run through ADOH, and Mike knows them. They're the same ones that did have the AZ.home. They've done these programs before. So, and this one, as I read I have in front of me the draft plan. The final plan has to be submitted by the 17th of this month. They're trying to get it because remember, October 3rd, the moratorium's gone. So that's when things start to blow up. So this time we're trying to get ahead of it. And just so that I'll go through the people who are eligible for it real quick so that they will know what they need to do. And the biggest key in this, even back to the rental assistance program, I've been talking to my counterparts who do that, is the people's lack of knowledge of the material they need to apply. And if you don't have all that, that just throws you further back because they won't process it if you don't have it. Then you have to resubmit. And that's what's caused this long queue of people not being able to get assistance. That coupled with the fact that some of these jurisdictions wanted too much information. They didn't really need all the information they were requiring. But back to the home people. They anticipate that they will have $180 million to provide direct assistance to low-income homeowners. And the mortgage types are first mortgages, second mortgages, loans secured by manufactured housing, contracts for deed or land contracts. The eligible housing costs and assistance types are the reinstatement payments. They'll pay a reinstatement allowance will allow a homeowner to reinstate a mortgage up to 12 months in delinquency, or to pay the house-related costs relating to the period of forbearance. And they anticipate $111 million for that. They anticipate spending $3 million on allocating to insurance assistance. That's for homeowners insurance. You're behind on that, and utilities. If you're behind on those, they're going to set aside $18 million to help you with that. And they expect to allocate $27.3 million of it to monthly mortgage assistance. Now, there's a cap. There's a $25,000 cap per household for all of these different assistances that they're going to offer you. What you need to be eligible: you have to attest that you've experienced the financial hardship after January 21, 2020 associated with the COVID pandemic, provide income documentation, and are found to be at or below 150% of the area's median income. That's the AMI is the way they talk about it. Currently own and occupy a primary residence in Arizona. That can be single family or up to 4 units. Here's the key, because a lot of people, if you go to azhousing.gov, that is the Arizona Housing Department's website. On there, you can find out what your AMI is and all that, so that you can figure out if you're a family of 5, what it is, what your maximum income can be. The difference is going to be that they're going to figure it, this is a good deal. They're going to figure your income based upon your adjusted gross income. Not the gross that you have on your W-2, it's on your adjusted gross. So that's going to lower your income. That's going to help a lot more people qualify for this assistance. So that's very important that you have your tax returns. And that's what, when we did this, when I was doing this for the last mortgage foreclosure type thing, that was one of the problems. No one had tax returns. They don't save them, or they didn't file. Now, if you didn't file, again, they're going to try to make this one streamlined. They're going to give you the ability to explain that. Why didn't you file? Bring in your W-2 forms, bring in your 1099s. They're going to do everything they can to get the assistance to you, but you have to have the documentation. And that's the problem that we run into. People don't have the documentation all the time. Now, the application process is going to be just like the one they had for the other foreclosure situation. It's going to be done online. Now, that is problematic. But if you have a smartphone, you can get access to the internet. So the problem you may have with a smartphone is being able to upload the documents that they require, your pay stubs, tax returns, and things of that nature. But at least you'll be able to access. Now, places like the Greater Phoenix Urban League and other nonprofit organizations can help you if you have a need to get those things scanned so they can be uploaded. We can help you do that kind of stuff so that you don't lose out merely because you don't have the ability. You have all the documentation, but you don't have the ability to get the documentation to the person who can help you. We'll help you. We will help you with that.
Right. Now, that's to kind of go back to something that you mentioned earlier with the different pools of money that is available to cover different expenses. You mentioned rent assistance, utility, and mortgage assistance that this program is going to help facilitate. Is that correct, Herb?
Yes. In addition to that, HOA, if you're happy, HOAs are dangerous. If you don't pay them, they'll take your house too. So right. They cover HOA and they cover back taxes and things like that. But the other thing is just the aggregate. The aggregate cannot exceed $25,000. So if they figured it on a basic mortgage being what, $1,300 a month. So you take 12 months of that, and then you add another 3 months to pay it in advance. And they came up with some average numbers for what homeowners insurance. I think they figured $200 a month, taxes around the same. What they didn't have a handle on is utility, because they will help utilities also. They don't know what, because that's going to vary all over the place. But it's what's important about it is start gathering this info. If you have in a mortgage forbearance now, start gathering all this information now, and don't wait till the last minute and have to search for it, because that's just going to throw you further behind.
Right. And again, so this applies to both renters and homeowners. Obviously, do not wait until the last minute. Start gathering your documents now. The moment this funding becomes available, you do want to have your information
Yes.
readily available, submitted, and processed as quickly as possible.
And the other thing is, some people, not everyone is like the lady the example I gave you, didn't have a job. Some people are working right now, but chose to get a forbearance because of their other expenses didn't allow them to pay. So if you're working now, then what you need to do is you need to talk to your lender and see a housing counselor. Because what we can do is get together and we can take them through this waterfall I was telling you about, make sure that they look at the correct things, give you the proper credit for things, so that you don't have to wait and use all that forbearance money and have the heartache of wondering whether you're going to keep your home or not keep your home. You can start working on that right now.
Right.
And because it's going to take a while, this thing's not going to happen overnight. Again, I was talking to one of my banker friends, while they know this is coming and they think they're going to be able to gin up pretty quick to go back to what it was like during the other foreclosure days. But some of the challenges they have is this single person. I mean, when you have to have only one person that you have to deal with, that's kind of tough when you have a huge bank and all these, what do we have? What did I say we had here? 33,000 mortgages or something like that. One person can't handle 33,000 mortgages. But so you should do whatever you can now. Don't wait until the moratorium has been lifted. If you're working, or even if you're not working, start working on getting all the documents that I mentioned together. And if you need to get information on that, that's why I said go to azhousing.gov, and they have it there. You can go on a link and they will tell you exactly what you need.
Right.
The website right now says you'll be able to get to it when we open it up, because they haven't opened it up yet because they don't have the money and have it ready yet. But
right. Yeah, and that kind of opens up the conversation to another issue when you mentioned some folks choosing to forbear their mortgage because they had other expenses that they needed to take care of.
mm-hmm.
And so just want to kind of let's open up the conversation and talk about affordable housing and how affordable is housing, particularly in Arizona with these the transplants coming into the desert for the job opportunities that exist and whatnot. So if anyone wants to kind of share some thoughts on, how that is impacting this housing crisis that we experience.
Well, it's getting real bad. I think the average home, the mean, and Mike, you or Courtney Gordon, I think it's close to $400,000 now.
Yeah.
A mean home, the house price of a mean house. And if you look at it, unless you have 20% down, which most people don't, and even at 3.5%, 3.5% on a $400,000 house is like $15,000. You have to have that, and that doesn't include your closing costs. Now, let's say you got 30,000. So that means you have to be able to qualify for $370,000 mortgage. And do you know what type of income it takes to do that? I mean, it's the folks that we deal with all the time, these low to middle income, they don't make that kind of money. And so they're literally priced out of the housing market. And that's one of the other things through the Arizona Coalition and just my participation with some of the banks. I'm always talking to all the lenders, asking them, what is it you are doing or can you do to help folks buy a house? I mean, it's, people come here and they have credit scores, they have a credit score of 750, and they may have $15,000 down, but they only make $35,000 a year. They can't buy a house. That's sad, but they can't buy a house because they can't afford the mortgage.
Well, they can't afford to rent either.
That's true. I'm down about that, right?
So let me tell you some of my woes. When I started in this work in the early 90s, we were administering voucher type programs. The 1-bedroom fair market rent, as HUD calls it, it's a It's a number that they set right around 40th percentile of the market, right? Because they say this is how much we want to pay for a voucher. They want to give people too nice a housing, right? So
right.
$478 was the 1-bedroom fair market rent back then. The one that's coming out that'll be effective October 1st for a 1-bedroom is $1,091.
Wow.
And that's 40th percentile of the market, right? So go around right now. My wife's a principal in Chandler. She had a young lady, first job, hired her as a teacher, first-year teacher. She moved here from out of state, and she looked and looked and looked, and she could not find a 1-bedroom apartment in Chandler for anything under about $1,600. So the rents have escalated to a point of madness. There is no vacancy. Multifamily apartment communities in the Phoenix metropolitan area sell like hotcakes. We're the fastest, hottest market for sale of apartment communities in this country. And they're mostly being purchased by institutional owners, right? Real estate investment trusts and others who, the name of the game is to maximize the return on their investment.
Right.
And so they're purchasing those, putting in some rehab, some marketing, and jacking the rents up pretty high to the point where, it's just very, very difficult for anybody to afford rent. In my world, I care, more about those of the folks that we're trying to serve and that public housing authorities are trying to serve who have a voucher in their hand. So they've won that golden ticket. They've waited for God knows how long, navigated a system. They've got a voucher. Now they're out searching for a unit to use that voucher in. And they can't find any that are within the program guidelines as far as rental amounts, the HUD fair market rents. And those that are there and available, we have a lot of landlords who just opt out. They just say, we don't take voucher programs here. We don't deal with programs. So I wanted to shout out, if it's okay, to one of your members, Celtic Property Management. They're an excellent property management firm that specializes in low-income housing, tax credit properties. And they love vouchers. They take vouchers, and they're a very good partner. So if there are landlords who are listening, one thing that we can do is make sure that you're agreeable to participate in voucher type programs, right? And we're doing a lot right now to incentivize them with signing bonuses, with risk mitigation funds that Courtney mentioned earlier, that if a landlord does have a tenancy go awry, there's some unpaid rent perhaps, or some move out cleaning costs and damages, they can make a claim against an initiative to get repaid for those costs. So it's not the same program, I think, that people harken back to in the 80s. It's a different program. It's a well-run program, good quality housing program administration with good tenants who are ready to rent. So I know we lost Courtney there, but I would just say, just a shout out to the landlords who are taking our programs. We need them more than ever right now.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mike. So what is and again, the housing crisis we are experiencing that may have been exacerbated due to the pandemic, but particularly here in Arizona, that problem isn't going away anytime soon. What is the solution? What are some ideas? What are some ways that we can help just make living in Arizona more affordable?
Well, I've got a fact sheet here that I got. This came out about 7 or 8 days ago. It's a fact sheet from the Biden-Harris administration, immediate steps to increase affordable housing supply. Did you read that, Mike? Yeah, so it's some of the things that Mike mentioned about the institutional people buying all the houses. Well, the government wants to say now, well, they can still buy some, but we're going to give first look to the principals, and we'll give first look to nonprofits who are in that housing buying and rehab business. They get the first opportunity to buy these, as opposed to giving it to the investors who swoop in and buy them thousands at a time. So that's one of the things they're going to do. The other thing is they're going to look at, they want to boost the supply of manufactured housing. For a long time, they wouldn't loan on that stuff. So I guess, who was it? Wasn't it Freddie Mac, Mike? They were the first ones that said they would loan on, I think it's Freddie Mac said they would loan on manufactured housing. Because manufactured housing now, and I think we have 2 or 3 manufacturing housing companies here in the Phoenix metro area. And he was telling me that you can't tell them, you go right next, you couldn't tell that from a stick-built house when they put the manufactured housing up. So when it got to that quality, Freddie said, yeah, we'll loan on those. We'll buy loans again, so they don't actually do the loans. they buy the loans from the mortgage companies. And once the mortgage companies found out that they could sell the loan to Freddie and Fannie, then of course they're going to loan the money out. So that should help. See, they're going to relaunch the Federal Financing Bank and HUD Risk Sharing Program, and they're going to give more money to from Freddie and Fannie for income housing tax credit. So that should make the folks that Mike was just appealing to happy,
Right?
Because it'll give them more money so they can build more affordable tax credit units, because we certainly need it.
Mm-hmm. So there sounds to be like the state government is taking some steps to help incentivize.
This is the federal government.
Federal government, excuse me. Federal government is taking some steps to incentivize some of the investors to build and make affordable housing more readily available to those that are in need. Courtney, welcome back. We lost you for a brief minute, but glad to have you back on the broadcast. So yeah, we were just talking about affordable housing, not because this does transcend the pandemic. Just living in a community that you can afford to live in and work in. As the example that Mike mentioned, you got a teacher in Chandler that just simply could not afford a one-bedroom unit in the community that she was working in. So that was a bit challenging. But again, this is one of your areas of expertise. Any thoughts that you'd like to share on that? I believe you're on mute.
You got to unmute yourself.
That is the reality of live television. So Courtney seems to be having some technical issues at the moment, but we'll get it back onto the broadcast as soon as we get the technical aspects working right. So to pause for a moment, anybody in the audience that has a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. We did have one question come in, and if you all don't mind, I'll go ahead and pull up that question, ask it to our panelists. Feel free to jump in as you see fit. So between the unemployment adder for COVID and the abundance of employees looking to fill jobs, how can extending the moratorium on evictions be justified? So again, I guess anyone want to take a stab at responding to this before we kind of get back into the flow of the program and hopefully get Courtney back?
I didn't know that it had been extended. My understanding was that it was cut off.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the Supreme Court,
they said that the agency that created that lacked the standing to be able to do that, and so it's been ended.
Yeah, but I think the point though that he's making is well taken, right? There was, I was just speaking with a gentleman this morning who had an employee who was earning about $700 per week working for him, and he got $840 a week on unemployment, and so he opted to not work for some period of time. And I think, I think it's just important to understand that there's a lot of people who have been impacted by this pandemic inequitably. And I think President Dean said it at the top of the show, and I'm the last person to speak to it, but I would just say this hasn't hit everybody the same way.
Nope.
And we're really, fortunate that the clients that we provide our assistance to who are disabled, who have serious mental illness, who've come out of homelessness, their rent is already affordable because we're not requiring that they pay any more than 30% as it is.
Right.
So they haven't been subject to eviction. And the moratorium hasn't been that big of a deal for them. But there's a lot of people out there who've needed that protection. So, but I think it's a good point. We got to get people back to work, and we need to get rent paid and everybody back in the swing of things. So,
surely, Courtney, welcome back again. We'll keep opening. We'll leave the light on. We'll keep the door unlocked. If you drop off, feel free to just come back. Once you're part of the program. So there was a question from the audience, as you might be able to see it on the screen, between unemployment added for COVID and abundance of employees looking to fill jobs. How can extended moratorium on evictions be justified? We made clear that is not the case at the moment, but I guess the question still lingers. There are some folks advocating for that. So if you wanted to share any comments on that, please do. And we do have you on mute. You're good. You're live.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to point out is that there is a housing shortage. There is not enough supply, period. There's not enough supply for people with money. There's not enough supply for people without money. So what happens is the people who have the least amount of money are the ones who have the hardest time with finding housing that they can afford. One of the ways that we provide affordable housing as a nation is through a low-income housing tax credit. Arizona gets $20 million a year federally to build affordable housing. And when I'm talking about affordable housing, I'm talking about income-based housing where you are only paying 30%, no more than 30% of your income toward housing. That's say affordable housing. That's what I'm talking about. Now, when we get into the non-government funded housing, that's when we get into people, the teacher that Mike was talking about. In Phoenix, which Phoenix is, the largest city in the county, so we can base pretty much everything off of that as a baseline. In Phoenix, you need to make $21 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. $21 an hour. And right now, wages are only getting up to like $17, $18 an hour. After the pandemic, wages have risen, but they still haven't risen to the level that people need to be able to afford housing without assistance. So one of the things that the state, cities, counties, and Mike can speak to this, have been trying to figure out, okay, how do we get and how do we produce more housing? How do we preserve more housing? The city of Phoenix itself has a program where they want to, by 2030, I believe it is, preserve 50,000, produce or preserve 50,000 housing units. Even that won't be enough. So I know I sound like a Debbie Downer, but that's the reality of the situation. There is not enough housing, nor will there be in the foreseeable future. So there need to be different types of solutions to housing, both people who can afford housing, right, who are not experiencing homelessness or are not reliant on a minimum wage job. There has to be solutions for those folks, as well as the teachers who are going to work every day, or the people who are working at call centers and things like that, because those jobs just don't pay what's necessary.
Thank you so much, Courtney. That is great information, great insight to a problem that this doesn't get enough credit or enough attention, that it's not as simple as get a better job, or make more money. It's easier said than done. And when you got, so many jobs that simply you have to, work 60 hours a week in order to afford to live. That's just, it's not a rational line of thinking that, is kind of contributing to this problem, So between Courtney, Herb, and Mike, we got a few more minutes left in the broadcast. We don't have any questions in the audience at the moment, but I'm encouraging everyone, if you are tuning in, if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. We'll give our panelists opportunity to get share some closing thoughts in a moment. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We're gonna make every effort to get them answered before we time off today. Just really quick, if anyone has information or resources that they would like to share, this website, I know we shared a couple earlier today, but if someone is out there in need of help, whether it's a renter, homeowner, or someone experiencing homelessness, if they do have access to, information resources to kind of take advantage of them, what would you share? What would you like to communicate to those out there, and how they can take action to help this situation immediately?
To both the renter and the folks that have their mortgages in forbearance is to go to Arizona Department of Housing, because they do both of those things for you. They've hired, I guess it's Wildfire is sort of an intermediary that does the rental piece, and they will be the ones if additional funds. I heard that they are about to run out of funds for that rental, but they expect to get more. And if they do, that will be the person or the group that will help you get that stuff done. So My suggestion would be to get on those websites and find out basically what it is you need to help yourself in the way of documentation, because that's really is what's holding it up. If you don't have proper documentation, they can't process it because they won't have the information they need to do that. And that's what I would encourage everyone to do.
Yeah, and I'll just give a quick shout out. I think Herb, you might still be on the board of directors for these guys, but you mentioned earlier the Arizona Housing Coalition.
Yeah.
There are statewide advocacy and membership organization for people in the homelessness and affordable housing space. And so they're a trade association, but they do a lot of really important work at the state legislature and with the individual cities and counties to continue to push for the creation of more affordable housing for all Arizonans. And so I'll chat that website there. You know, you can become a member at the individual level. They've got a good annual conference. They got a newsletter. So there's ways to get involved. And that, I think at the end of the day, not that I'm doing my closing statement here, but just advocacy is important, right? We need to make sure that people hear this. I think for the first time in a very long time, affordable housing has made its way as a really mainstream issue, right? Like Americans care about this, and Arizonans are feeling this more than other citizens across the country because of the growth, the economy. You know, we just have some real needs right now. So we need to make sure that our elected officials understand that we can't, business as usual is not going to solve this.
Absolutely. Courtney, did you have anything to share in that area?
Oh, I've got lots.
Take it away.
So the first thing that I wanted to point out is if you are on the verge of eviction, you think you're going to have a problem, make a plan, because eviction for non-payment can happen now. During the moratorium, it was not supposed to happen, so you were safe, but it can happen now, and it happens quickly. Within 2 weeks, you're out. So you need to make a plan now. And part of that plan should be applying for services. Be that through the City of Phoenix, if you're a family through UMOM, if you're a single person through Human Services Campus, those are your ways into the system to get to affordable housing. One of the things I've noticed is that people don't know that these are an option. And they end up living in their car, or they end up couch surfing or doing different things because they didn't know early on that they should have gotten in the queue. The other thing that I want to make sure I point out is if you are being evicted, make sure you go to court. Make sure you have your documentation. Make sure you show what happened. In some cases, particularly with the City of Phoenix, there is representation available. In certain cases through community legal services. Their web address is clsaz.org. It is income-based, but they can help you with your case if you live in the City of Phoenix. And if you don't live in the City of Phoenix, they can also help you with your case. However, it's a different level of help. But reach out to them, particularly if you have a little bit of time. If you've gotten that notice, not necessarily the 5-day to pay or quit, you've gotten that, contact these folks and they can walk you through how to do this. Because sometimes you can negotiate with your landlord not to have that eviction on your record, which will help you later on rent or buy or whatever else because it won't be on your record.
Yeah, and that's two important points that may not get enough attention. Is one, having an eviction on your record, so to speak, how challenging it can be for you to get housing in the future. But great insight. Make a plan. Do not wait. Take action sooner rather than later in order to kind of get out ahead of this as best you can. And again, read your mail, go to court, document your case. We want to give you all the resources, all the information you need in order to keep a roof over your head, over you and your family's head. It looks like we don't have any other questions in the chat. So I will yield to each of our panelists to give opportunity for some closing thoughts. And then we'll send it back over to President Dean for his closing thoughts as well. So we'll start with Courtney as we started to open up. Any closing thoughts?
I'm just gonna reiterate what I said before.
Sure.
Is my mic muted? Am I good?
No, you're good to go. We can hear you. We're good talking, but we can hear you.
What I said before, to have a plan, because what you don't want to be doing is jumping from Airbnb to Airbnb, from motel to motel, especially if you have kids. And if that means, kind of swallowing your pride and trying to and moving in with someone else, that's one of the that is one of the solutions actually that I got from the county. Is if you know you're going to be in this situation, make a plan to have somewhere to live. If that means living with your family, if that means living with your friends, while you get this figured out, do that, because this stuff happens very quickly.
Thank you, Courtney, for that. Mike, we'll go to you for closing thoughts.
I think Courtney said it right. Have a plan, and we don't want you to hit the homeless services system. It's an emergency help system. It's not a place you want to be, and the resources there are very much prioritized for those folks who, have the most severe housing and health and service needs. And so, staying housed is obviously the very first option. I just will say, we are going to be launching a soft launch on October 1st, and then hopefully by January 1st, a official launch of a new initiative that is a full-scale landlord liaison program that will be responsible for reaching out and recruiting and incentivizing and supporting landlords to accept housing voucher programs. And we'll be working on behalf of the entire homeless services system at that time with that new initiative. And it'll have a brand and a website, and hopefully some very compelling communication and storytelling about the importance of helping people to get back into housing and the role that landlords play. And so I'm kind of shameless. Landlords have been public enemy number one for some time, and maybe deservedly so in some cases, but I will say that a lot of landlords are doing some really, really good work. We have a pretty strong relationship with the Arizona Multi-Housing Association and other landlord support groups because at the end of the day, they want their rent paid. We want to help them pay their rent and get people back into housing so that they can launch and have housing as the platform for improved outcomes for their health, their economic opportunities, and everything else. So I'll let you guys know when that new site is ready so that you guys can help us spread the word and recruit people to accept those housing programs and expand more housing opportunities for those people that we want to get back into housing. So thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Mike, thank you so much. And definitely when that website becomes available, whenever you're ready to launch that campaign, that initiative, that advocacy work, Greater Phoenix Urban League will be available to you to help spread it and get it out to the public who is very much in need of it.
I'll call Courtney first, though. I just want to.
Great idea. I would call Courtney first as well. She's obviously one of the leaders in this space, as far as shedding a light on some of these issues. So
thank you.
The closing thoughts that I would have, there's two of them really. Some people are ashamed, or they feel ashamed when they get in these situations because they don't want to share. They feel they just get down on themselves. And what they have to understand is that these things happen through no fault of your own. And there are other people in your same situation, and maybe even a worse situation. And that's what housing counselors are here for. We are here to help you through those kinds of situations. We don't have all the answers, but as Mike said earlier, if I don't know the answer, I'll find it for you, or I will send you to the person who does have it. And for those of you who don't want to talk to someone and share your pain, then you should go to HUD.gov. You can go to Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. They all have websites. Each of those, including FHA, each of those websites will give you all the information you need. If you happen to have, and even Freddie or Fannie, you can put your address in and they'll tell you whether or not they own your loan. So it tells you whether or not their conditions apply, so that you will be informed when you talk to your servicer to know exactly what that servicer should be offering you. So that would be my my last closing thoughts, because I believe an informed person is a better informed, educated person is going to have better outcomes than one who is not informed. So you need to know.
Thank you, Herb, for the closing thoughts, and thank you to our other panelists, Mike Shore and Courtney Holmes, for joining us today on this very important topic. Talk about the housing crisis. We have a number of websites that was dropped in the comments. You'll be able to return to this video broadcast at any time to take a look at those. We'll be sure to share it in our email communication so that you can get the information that you need to improve your situation. Without any further ado, I would like to yield the floor back to President Dean for closing thoughts on the program.
Thank you, Jerry. I would just want to give a special thanks to the panelists for providing our audience with some very useful and important information. Courtney Holmes, Mike Shore, and Herb Jackson, we thank you. A very special thanks to each and every one of you for the kind of information, and hopefully the audience listened as closely as I did and got some information that would be good for them in terms of becoming homeowners, not becoming an eviction, and everything's going to be okay. And if you haven't been vaccinated, get vaccinated ASAP. Together, we make a difference. I will say good night, and we look forward to seeing you next month on our Meet the Leaders Forum.